This nuclear-powered aircraft carrier carries enough firepower to flatten a small country. 5 Russian warships appeared at attack speed. What happened next defied every tactical manual. Hit subscribe because this encounter never made headlines. 5:19 a.m. International waters. The radar tone changes. Detection. When radar screens tell a different story, the detection. When radar screens tell a different story. 5 contacts appear on radar at 5:19 a.m. But here's what most people miss about modern naval detection systems. The A or SPY-3 radar aboard carriers like the George Washington can track objects the size of a baseball at 200 miles. Yet these 5 Russian warships appeared at just 20 nautical miles. That's not a detection failure. That's deliberate. Russian Admiral Gorskov-class frigates and Udaloy-class destroyers use specialized hull coatings and electronic countermeasures designed specifically to reduce radar signature until they're exactly where they want to. B. The Combat Information Center watches these contacts materialize within seconds of each other, their spacing mathematically perfect, 3.2 nautical miles apart in a formation that takes months of coordination to execute. Speed reads 23 knots, then jumps to 25. Commercial vessels don't accelerate like that. These ships moved in sync, throttling up simultaneously across 16 mi of ocean. The bridge crew knows immediately what this means, but what these Russian ships did next would force a decision that only 3 carrier captains have faced in the last decade. The radio silence, why no response, is the loudest message. The radio silence, why no response, is the loudest message. Protocol requires any military vessel within 12 nautical miles to respond to bridge-to-bridge radio calls. The George Washington hails on Channel 16, the international distress and calling frequency, monitored by every ship at sea. Standard English first, clear and professional. Silence. Then Russian, spoken by a fluent translator, kept on the bridge specifically for moments like this. Still nothing. Here's what that silence actually means in naval doctrine. Under the 1972 Convention on International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, also called REGS, vessels must communicate intentions when risk of collision exists. At 18 nautical miles with closing speeds, that risk is legally established. By refusing to respond, the Russian formation isn't being rude. They're making a calculated statement that they don't recognize the carrier's authority to question their movements. This exact scenario happened in 2016 when Russian destroyers shadowed the USS Ronald Reagan near the Sea of Japan. The distance drops to 16 mi. On the surface plot, those 5 contacts begin doing something that changes everything. They're spreading out, each ship adjusting course by precise degrees, forming something naval tacticians call an arc interception. The geometry of control, how 5 ships can stop a supercarrier pattern. The geometry of control, how 5 ships can stop a supercarrier. At 14 nautical miles, the Russian formation completes its spread. Ship 1 holds the center. Ships 2 and 3 angle outward at 35 degrees. Ships 4 and 5 extend the wings at 50 degrees. From directly above, it forms a shallow crescent 12 mi wide with the USS George Washington's projected course threading straight through the center. This isn't random. Russian naval doctrine, specifically from their publication Fundamentals of Naval Tactics, teaches arc formations for area denial without direct confrontation. The math is brutal in its simplicity. A Nimitz-class carrier is 1,092 ft long, with a turning radius of approximately 2,100 ft at standard speed. The Russian ships position themselves inside that decision window. If the carrier turns now, she'll be angling toward one of the flanking ships, appearing to yield. Corridor control. If she maintains course, she passes within 3 nautical miles of all 5 vessels, close enough that any miscalculation becomes a collision. Electro-optical cameras zoom in as the range drops below 10 mi. Now here's a question. If you were the carrier captain with 5,000 crew members under your command, would you turn to avoid the confrontation or hold course and risk everything on the assumption that the other side will blink first? The closest point of approach. When miles become feet in strategic terms. The closest point of approach when miles become feet in strategic terms. Naval computers calculate something called CPA, closest point of approach in real time. It factors speed, heading, wind, current, and the turning characteristics of both vessels. For the George Washington and the lead Russian destroyer, CPA initially reads 4.3 nautical miles. That's about 26,000 ft, which sounds safe until you understand what it really means. At a combined closing speed of 50 knots, that distance evaporates in less than 5 minutes. The number updates every 3 seconds on the bridge display. 4.3 becomes 4.1, then 3.9. Each click downward represents another few thousand ft of ocean vanishing between steel hulls. At 3.8 nautical miles, one of the Russian ships increases speed. Not dramatically, just 2 knots from 25 to 27. That acceleration is a probe, testing whether the carrier will react to changes in the equation. She doesn't. The officer of the deck reports bearing drift on contact 3. The Russian ship on the starboard side adjusts its angle by 5 degrees, tightening the corridor. Now the carrier's path threads through a gap that's narrowed by half a mile, yet the carrier doesn't slow down, doesn't alter course, doesn't even acknowledge the geometric trap being set around her. The weapon nobody saw. How documentation defeats aggression. Weapon nobody saw. How documentation defeats aggression. At 2.9 nautical miles, an MH-60R Siege Hawk helicopter lifts from the carrier's deck. It doesn't scramble, doesn't rush, just rises smoothly into a standard patrol orbit. Here's what that helicopter actually does that changes the entire dynamic. Mounted under its fuselage is an ANAS 44C infrared sensor that can read engine heat signatures from 15 mi away. Every Russian ship is now being recorded in thermal imaging that shows power output, throttle positions, and even whether weapon systems are energized based on heat bloom patterns. The helicopter also carries an AAL-Q210 electronic support measures pod that maps every radar emission, radio frequency, and data link transmission within 50 mi. This isn't surveillance, it's evidence collection. Everything captured by that helicopter feeds directly into encrypted data storage that timestamps every second. But there's a secondary effect nobody talks about. The moment that helicopter entered stable orbit, the Russian formation's precision began to degrade. One ship's bearing drifted by 2 degrees before correcting. At 2.5 nautical miles, the lead Russian ship reduces speed by 1 knot. The formation is loosening, not because they were forced to, but because the carrier demonstrated something more powerful than weapons. The doctrine of restraint, why not turning, was the only move restraint. Why not turning was the only move. There's a concept in naval strategy called resolute bearing, which means maintaining your planned course regardless of pressure. It sounds simple, but it's based on decades of Cold War encounters where the side that flinched first lost credibility for years afterward. In 1988, the Soviet frigate Bezetny deliberately bumped the USS Yorktown in the Black Sea, trying to force her out of disputed waters. The Yorktown held course, absorbed the impact, and continued her mission. That single decision established precedent that U.S. carriers don't deviate from lawful transit routes. The George Washington's captain knows this history because every carrier commander studies those incidents before taking command. Turning away from the Russian formation would signal that coordinated pressure works, inviting similar confrontations every time a carrier transits international waters near Russian operating areas. By 1.9 nautical miles, the Russian arc is visibly dissolving. Ships that were synchronized minutes ago now move independently, spacing increasing, headings diverging from the intercept geometry. The attempted block didn't fail because of firepower or technology. Here's something to consider. In your own life, when have you held your ground against pressure? And did the situation resolve because you didn't flinch or because you found a compromise? The aftermath written in the aftermath, written in logs, not headlines. Logs, not headlines. By 5:44 a.m., the surface plot shows 5 Russian warships trailing at 8 nautical miles, their vectors parallel instead of intersecting. They're still present, still watching, but no longer controlling space. The encounter ends not with a dramatic moment, but with a navigation log entry. Multiple contacts maintained safe distance. No deviation from planned track required. That single sentence, time-stamped and digitally signed, becomes the official record of what happened. Here's why that matters more than any news coverage. Naval incidents are judged not by perception, but by documented fact. Did the carrier deviate? No. Did the Russian ships violate collision regulations? No. Did anyone escalate to weapons? No. On paper, this was a routine transit with nearby traffic. But in every naval operations center that reviews this footage, the lesson is clear. The helicopter returns to deck after 47 minutes airborne, its sensor data, already uploaded to Fleet Command. That intelligence matters far more than any headline could. Because the next time these vessels deploy, U.S. commanders will know exactly how they move, how they communicate, and where their discipline breaks down. The USS George Washington conclusion continued her mission without firing a shot or changing course. 5 Russian warships faded into the horizon, their blocking attempt logged and forgotten. At sea, power isn't measured by who shouts loudest, but by who moves at all. Subscribe now for more untold military encounters that never made the news.